Welcome to Ignite Donuts podcast. This is episode 3, and today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship in an already existing business. So this is a kind of a cool concept that I thought about and learned about a year ago, is that being an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean just starting new businesses. I think that's what a lot of people think, but it can also be done within existing businesses. So I know you've had some experience with that, Casey. You worked for another donut company for a while. Did you experience any of that trying to innovate within another company, or did you feel that the barriers of the company prevented you from doing that?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think that it took me, there were some barriers to entry to begin with. And to give some of our viewers background, I worked at Cops and Donuts as an intern and an assistant manager a couple years ago. And the barriers to entry when I worked there was just trying to learn their system, learning my role in their system was the most limiting piece of it, especially as an intern. Didn't get the full responsibility, which is good at the beginning of taking over the whole business, which is good because I had to learn. And so I think that it was limiting to that extent, but I don't think that it limited the questions I did ask. It maybe limited my authority and the execution piece on that, but I could always talk to the supervisors or the managers above me and owners and share ideas. The innovation really came from just solving problems. Every day was a day full of issues, and whether that's was coworkers or customers not enjoying the product or whatever it might be. I mean, that happens at every business.
Right.
We had to solve that issue. One story, and I think we mentioned it in the first episode, but I'll just tell it in length. It was about the POS system, points of sales system, malfunctioned one day when I was at work. This was at the time where I was pretty well known within Cops and Donuts, and I had a little bit more of authority, so to speak. And so I was assigned on the project to fix their POS system because for whatever reason there was a disconnection with the wiring that was previously installed. And the entrepreneurship mindset and piece in that situation was like, I needed to solve this issue because entrepreneurship creates ideas and innovation, right, Chris?
Yeah.
But it also it solves problems to the issues. So long story short, I had to call the tech support, which was all the way in India, which was interesting. And there's that accent barrier there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit difficult to understand, I'm sure, from both sides of the phone. But we ended up working it out. And I had to, it's like when you have malfunction on your phone or your computer, your first reaction is to restart. So the restart button is a little bit more complicated on a POS system. You basically have to in this revolves system that they were using, that was the company that they did use at the time. I don't know if they're still using, but I had to follow the 150-foot wire near the ceilings and of the building, and find their different. I don't remember the terminology they had, but they had like little hub spots of where cords went into a little platform or box, and then 1 or 2 cords went out the other side and integrated it eventually into the register. So that was the receipt machine, the computer screen, so the system would operate. It was quite complicated, and it was middle of July, close to 95 degrees out, so I was sweating everywhere. But we ended up solving the issue, and saved Cops and Donuts several $1,000s, because the only other solution that they came up with outside of that was calling tech support in India to send someone all the way over to Clare, Michigan, and to solve that. Thankfully, I had an awesome support system that encouraged me to try to figure out the solution, and me ended up doing so. Just taking out all the plugs and plugging them back in. And so I know it's a long story, but essentially we figured out the issue. And so, yeah, there's always a way to have innovation that is already established in a business. It doesn't, you don't need to be an entrepreneur to just start a business. You could be an entrepreneur in an already existing business, which is the main message of our day,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, do you want to talk about that, just like from your experiences and your mindset on that? Because you talked about Rick Snyder at the New Venture competition last year, and how he kind of, made the audience think on that.
Right, yeah. Rick Snyder, the former governor of Michigan, he talked at CMU's New Venture competition last year. And one of his big messages was, again, what our topics, you don't have to start a business to be an entrepreneur. And he was kind of talking about it in an aspect of, you don't have to be the founder. A lot of times people are looking for team members. And that really hits home for me, because I joined Ignite Donuts as almost a team member. I was not a founder. So you don't have to be a founder to be an entrepreneur. They're not mutually exclusive. And that was his big message. And he invested in a lot of companies, and he was not the founder in any of them, but they were all successful. Well, some of them are successful. The big one he was really successful in was Gateway, I believe. I believe Gateway was the company he was a part of, which made personal computers in the early 2000s. They are not really around anymore. But on the thing of computers, I want to talk about the company HP, so Hewlett-Packard. In a book I had to read for class, it was called Zero to Run. It was written by Peter Thiel, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And Peter Thiel is the guy who basically founded PayPal. And he talks about HP as kind of a case study for what happens to businesses when they lose this entrepreneurship within a big business. So HP used to be this big company that would innovate and do all these incredible, cool things with technology, and they'd always on the bleeding edge of what was next. That was their company culture. Their culture in HP was to innovate within the broader company. And then management started to change up. Their board of directors changed up. Even their CEO changed up. And the company culture changed from innovating to just being safe and kind of keep the course and follow the numbers. And they turned very conservative. And what happened is HP went to this company that was the bleeding edge of technology to a company that's mostly known for some enterprise level technology and printers and some computers. I mean, they are a shell of their former past. They really had a large portion of the computer market, and because they lost that innovation, entrepreneurship within the company aspect to them, they fell really far. So it's an interesting case study of innovation within the company can really make the difference between your standard big corporation and these companies that seemingly come out of nowhere and are really successful. So that's the one example I can think of.
Yeah. You have a good principle right there, Chris, because I think going into the entrepreneurship undergraduate degree, I knew of businesses like the Apples, the Googles of the world that were just beginning to inspire innovation and creating different spaces for creativity, whether it's in their offices that they owned or just in the concepts that they drew out. And I believe, I remember, I don't know if Google still does this, but they had a policy where every Friday for their employees, they told their employees to work on a personal project. And the reason being is they wanted their employees to be productive. I mean, at the end of the day, the outcome ends up being production, and the innovation and the creativity Does the production match, the revenue that comes out as well? And so in order to maximize their production, they found out that by giving employees a day off to work on personal projects while they're still at work, and only making it a 4-day work week, that the employees were more productive in those 4 days. And in doing so, and working on their personal projects, they were inspired and created innovative solutions on their personal projects on those Fridays, which created those innovative solutions for the issues that Google faced in the weeks and months to come following that. So I think now, more than ever, we've already have seen like a spike in entrepreneurship, at least on a more national level. And I really think that if existing businesses and new businesses don't adapt entrepreneurship and innovative ideas within their business, they do not have a business model in the future. I mean, look at Amazon, for instance. I mean, they're always innovating, right? Yeah. They're taking over the world by innovating. And because we've learned that every single generation, and even within generations, there's movements and there's consumers change. And if businesses do not evolve with the consumers, they're gonna close up shop, regardless of what the business is.
Right. I think that's a pretty powerful sentiment. Whereas if you're not innovating, you don't have a business model for the future. I think that really stands out. Like, companies get stuck in a business model and do what works and just keep doing what works. But if you never change, you won't change the time. So that's an interesting conclusion. Then I guess you can draw the conclusion then that for a company to really be successful and continue to grow, you have to have entrepreneurship and or innovation. But I think entrepreneurship and innovation are almost synonyms in a way. So
yeah,
that's really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I also think that like entrepreneurship shouldn't be on just the CEO level. It should be on your regular day worker. So like, what we're trying to do at Ignite, obviously, is no matter what the employee is, wherever an employee falls within the responsibilities and roles in the chain of command. I mean, we're always trying to promote creative mindsets, because it could be the lowest person in terms of your hierarchy structure, your organizational chart structure, that creates the best solution. And for businesses, and this is directed probably to traditional businesses that haven't adapted ideas yet. Those businesses that don't choose to ask their employees for innovative solutions. I guess obviously it depends on what the issue is, but businesses, all I'm saying is businesses can understand their employees and how they function, and also build their relationship with employees by giving them a part in creating a solution for the company. And in doing so, that creates the solution for the company, and it creates loyalty. And I think that we see a lot of businesses have low hiring retention, because and what I mean by that is they have a lot of employees that quit because they don't like the job.
Yeah.
And I mean, some jobs are hard, and that's just inevitable, but a lot of employees, especially on the 18 to 24-year-old level, is like, if they don't like working, I'll just find another job to work at, right?
Right.
And so, entrepreneurship is and should be on every level within a business.
Absolutely. Well, that goes to the point of what the nature of entrepreneurship really is. I think we've discussed a couple of notions that it is, that most people think it has to be starting new businesses from scratch, and I think we've established that's not necessarily true. You can join on to a startup or even a larger company and still be an entrepreneur. And I think that's really just highlights the point that entrepreneurship isn't really even an action or a person or a thing you do. It's a way of almost thinking. I think it's an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial mindset is the term I'm looking for. And I think that's really what you're talking about. That's what's required for a company to survive and grow, and that's what creates a business model for the future is an entrepreneurial mindset. And I believe an entrepreneurial mindset is the polar opposite of keep on keeping on and staying the course. Those two
Yeah.
things are, I think, polar opposites, really. And the entrepreneur mindset is just a way of thinking. It's anything you're doing. How could this be better? How could this be different? How could I solve this problem? I think it really what makes the difference and what will make the difference for companies going in the future and will make the difference how we deal with the current situation we're dealing with virus wise. So
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, Chris? Like you and I have a lot of stories to tell and share, and I'm sure our viewers will be able to listen to those stories. But I'd like to, give an invitation to anyone, professors, entrepreneurs, student entrepreneurs, people within organizations that have stories about entrepreneurship in the wide range of those topics that involve in that. And because like this platform, this podcast is primarily for us to learn about other entrepreneurs and other occupations, people, individuals, and how they've problem solved. So if you're listening to this podcast, the Ignite Donuts podcast, and you find us on any of our social media channels, please feel free to reach out to us, and we would love to schedule a date where we can have a meaningful interview and learn a little bit about yourself and see how we can derive where the entrepreneurial mindset and the root of that entrepreneurial mindset came from, and how you're how individuals are dealing with the current climate that we're facing with. So I just want to extend that invitation to any listener, really. We'd love to have a conversation and have a talk, like I said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Excuse me. We're putting out the call. We want to know about your entrepreneurial mindset, your entrepreneurial experience. I think we talked about, it's pretty obvious that entrepreneurship is pretty broad, especially because I think the conclusion we came to is a way of thinking, basically. So if you have any mindset on that, any insight, we'd love to talk to you, maybe even bring you on the podcast. You could be a guest star. So just let us know, direct message us through our various channels or ignitedonuts@gmail.com. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap up the Ignite Donuts podcast, episode 3. So as Casey was saying, if you liked it, follow us, subscribe to the podcast, go to ignitedonuts.com if you want information. Casey, do you have anything else you want to add before we sign out here?
Yeah, if you're listening to this and if you've gone through any episode, let alone all 3 episodes, and you think that this is worthwhile, please hit subscribe and share this with at least one friend. We're trying to, innovate here and spark some innovation, and we really created this podcast for free for entrepreneurs. We just want to collaborate, share our stories, share our thoughts and our tips, and we'd really love for you to share this podcast, and hopefully, if you're interested, we'd love to bring you on to the show. So those are my final thoughts, Chris.
Well, that's great. So with that, this is Chris signing out.
This is Casey.
All right, we'll see y'all next week.